pin you on this 10th anniversary of the opening of Guantánamo, which falls right around the same date that President Obama vowed to close the prison 3 years ago. Shortly after taking office in January 2009, President Obama signed an executive order calling for Guantánamo's closure within a year.
Order to effect the appropriate disposition of individuals currently detained by the Department of Defense at Guantánamo and promptly to close the detention facility at Guantánamo consistent with the national security and foreign policy interests of the United States and the interests of justice. I hereby order.
Since making that pledge, Obama's faced bipartisan opposition in Congress, with lawmakers blocking funds preventing the transfer of Guantánamo prisoners to U.S. soil. The latest Pentagon spending bill signed into law by President Obama mandates indefinite imprisonment for al-Qaeda prisoners. On Monday, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney said President Obama is still determined to close Guantánamo.
The commitment the president has to closing Guantánamo Bay is as firm today as it was during the campaign. We are all aware of the obstacles to getting that done as quickly as the president wanted to get it done, what they were, and the fact that they continue to persist. But the president's commitment hasn't changed at all. And it's the right thing to do for our national security interests.
That was White House Secretary Jay Carney. For more on this 10th anniversary of Guantánamo, we're joined by several guests. In a moment, we'll go to London to speak with a former Guantánamo prisoner. But first to Air Force Colonel Morris Davis, the former chief prosecutor at Guantánamo. He resigned his position in 2007 in protest of what he called political interference in the military commissions of Guantánamo prisoners. Joining us from Washington, D.C. Morris Davis, thank you for joining us. You are now opposed to the military commissions. You were the former chief prosecutor at Guantánamo. Why have you changed your stance?
Well, it's been more than a decade now since President Bush first authorized military commissions, and in that decade, we've completed a grand total of 6 trials, which is not exactly a ringing endorsement for the military commissions process. You know, as you know, the case went to the Supreme Court that said the initial military commissions President Bush created were fatally defective. Congress passed a statute in 2006 that President Obama said was deficient, another statute in 2009. So we keep telling the world over and over, this time we've got it right. And I think after a decade of failure, it's just time to give up on this process.
You heard Jay Carney talking about national security issues. How would you define national security? What do you think needs to happen at Guantánamo?
I think we need to close Guantánamo. It's become such a negative symbol, like Abu Ghraib. Just the term itself, Guantánamo, around the world conveys a message about the United States and what we represent. It was interesting yesterday hearing the State Department spokesman or spokeswoman talking about the case of Amir Khatami, the American citizen convicted in an Iranian court, which is indeed unfortunate. But she criticized their process, saying that here's a guy that was detained under suspicious circumstances, had a trial in secret, using a confession that was coerced. And I'm sitting there looking at this going, it sounds an awful lot like what we do at Guantánamo. So we lose our moral standing and our ability to really complain when others do pretty much what we've done at Guantánamo. So it's not in our interest to maintain that kind of image around the world.
What is your assessment of the bill that President Obama has just signed off on?
Well, I think it's a complete act of cowardice on his part. As I've stated before, I think on Inauguration Day, somewhere between the Capitol and the White House, a pair of testicles fell off the president because he said all the right things, he made all the right promises, and there's been a complete lack of leadership from the White House to deliver. You know, he threatened to veto the bill, which proved to be a hollow threat. And on New Year's Eve, he signed it into law, which is not a dramatic departure from what the policy's been for the last few years, but now it's law, where Guantánamo appears to be made permanent, to where the military, and it's not a role that the military wants, has become the Bureau of Prisons for terrorism suspects. So it's, you know, in this season of campaign in 2012, nobody's going to get elected or reelected saying, I stood up for the rights of detainees at Guantánamo. And so on the far right, you've got, it seems that no one can be too dumb or too hateful in campaigning on the right.
We're speaking with Air Force Colonel Morris Davis, former chief prosecutor at Guantanamo. We're going to break, then we'll be back. And we'll be also joined by two guests from London. Former Guantanamo prisoner Omar Daghez, a Libyan citizen who has residency in Britain, was held in U.S. custody after being arrested in Pakistan. And we'll be speaking with the former head of the Center for Constitutional Rights, Michael Ratner. CCR has just filed a lawsuit seeking to force the U.S. government to make public the videotapes of harsh interrogations carried out on a Saudi citizen. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We'll be back in a minute.